Welcome to City Chapters Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby J. This chapter, we have Brian Zapotocky. B-Zap. This friend of mine I met playing soccer, indoor soccer. We've been on a team, for a long time. I'm not playing currently. I had to take a little...
Sadly, we need your aggression.
Yeah. I took a little break. But me and Brian, we've just connected. He's always brought really good energy, and you just feel good when you're around him. He's a real estate agent for Windermere. His dad was a real estate agent. I don't really know the full backstory of all that, so we're going to learn about that today. And I think Brian has some really unique positive outlooks at life and how he approaches it. So I really wanted to have him on because I feel like I said, he just brings such great energy pretty much every time I'm around him. I actually don't even remember a time he's had bad energy. So that's
we need to hang out more.
Yeah. So
No, just kidding.
I just want to share that energy with you people that listen to our to my podcast, and appreciate you being here. All right. Yeah. Brian, what's going on, man?
Hey, nothing. How you doing, Bobby?
Good.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Great to be here. This is exciting. This is my first, like I told you earlier, my first podcast. So who knows what's going to happen here?
Yeah, I feel like my intro's a little rusty just because I haven't been in the studio as much lately.
Hey, no, that's great. No, thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I appreciate that you like the positive energy. I always try to be positive. Life's tough.
Yeah.
There's once you get out of, even maybe when you're a child, sometimes life's tough. But you get out of the house, and all of a sudden you got a lot of responsibility. A lot of people want things from you, so you gotta stay positive. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I try to do, but I really struggle with it, mainly just internally a lot of times. So it's great to be around people that are uplifting, like yourself. So let's just start kind of with your backstory. You were born, raised in Spokane?
Yeah, great question. No, I was actually born in Honolulu, Hawaii, if you can believe that. Yeah,
okay.
I'm a Hawaii boy. My paternal grandparents moved to Hawaii from Pennsylvania. They came from the steel country. It's where all the Zapotockys are located. So if you're looking for all of us, we're all back in Pennsylvania, and now we're spreading out. But they, my grandfather and grandmother on my dad's side, moved over to Hawaii, and that's where they raised my dad and his sister, my aunt. And then my mom actually met my dad because my dad's sister and my mom were really good friends. So my mom went over there, as the story goes, to just hang out for a year, and then she met my dad, and the rest is history. So here I am. So
how long did you live on the islands?
Yeah, lived on the, I believe it was the north side of Oahu, which is where Honolulu is located, for 7 years of life. And then we ended up moving to Wenatchee, Washington, and that's pretty much right smack dab in the middle of the state, if you're not familiar. And then we lived there for, I probably was there for, 7 to basically 19, so about 12 years. And then moved out here, or 18 or 19, moved out here for to go to Gonzaga Prep high school, and then ended up going to Gonzaga, and then getting in what I'm doing today. So yeah.
So did you lived in some dorms when you went to G Prep too, or something like that?
Yeah, so my family actually moved out here for my senior year. I moved out, and my family, we kind of lived in a short-term situation until we got a house, and then we all moved out here, and my dad had a home office, and so we became Spokane residents. So it was pretty fun. I'm a really big fan of Spokane. So. Yeah.
Did you play any sports in G Prep? Or?
Yeah, I did. I did basketball and I did soccer. I kind of wish I would have done track because all the girls were in track, but I didn't end up doing track. It wasn't that cool for me. But yeah, those are the main ones I did.
Okay. So you go to Gonzaga. What'd you study there?
Yeah, so I did undergrad in business administration. I had no idea what I wanted to do in college. Everybody said, you're supposed to go to college. So I said, great. So I got there and waited as long as I could. The first 2 years, you can just do kind of general stuff. And then after 2 years, they tell you need to choose something. And so I was like, well, let's do general business because that's general. I know I want to do something in business. I don't know quite what I want to do. And then they wanted us to choose what they call concentrations at Gonzaga. And so I did finance because my dad was primarily a finance guy. And then I did marketing because my really good friend was in marketing. And so I did finance and marketing, and then he did marketing and finance. So we did all our classes together. So it was pretty fun.
Nice. So how did you end up into real estate? Your dad is a real estate agent.
Yeah, so my dad's actually a retired real estate developer. My mom is a retired real estate agent. So
oh wow, both of them.
Yeah, so from the time I was a child, at 12 years old, a lot of families do a lot of different things. At 12 years old, Sunday after church, we'd jump in the car and we'd go look at houses. We'd go look at land that my dad was developing and that sort of thing. And I thought that was normal. Apparently not everybody does that every Sunday, but we did that. And so I actually, so I graduated, again, didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I did a variety of things. I did fruit cutting at Fred Meyer. It was when I first graduated, it was 2007, 2008. So that was the big financial crisis. And so I graduated and I was like, where are all the jobs? And so I did a variety of things. I did fruit cutting. I worked at Big Five Sporting Goods as a manager, all that sort of stuff, was just kind of bouncing around. And then I ended up as an office manager for a guy, I think, I'm trying to remember his name, Larry Saminsky out in Olympia. He had a little CPA firm. His daughter and I were friends. And so I ended up being an office manager there. And I really loved that. I remember seeing one of the big files in his office, and it was this massive file of this client, and they had kids and grandkids and all this sort of stuff. And so I kind of asked him about the client. He said, I said, forget what the guy's name was, like John or something. And said, I remember when John was just a single guy and didn't have anything to his name. And then, I've been with him the whole time. And I thought that was just the coolest thing. And so I said, I want to be an accountant. So I actually went back to Gonzaga and got my graduate degree in, they had a really cool program at that time where instead of doing kind of a typical MBA, Master's in Business Administration, they kind of separated it, kind of stripped it out and just made it a Master's in Accounting. So, or a Master's in Accountancy, I think is what they called it. And then I had a concentration in taxation. So I did that, I think, for a year and a half, got that done, and then became a CPA for 3 years. So
3 years. Okay, so what happens after that? Why'd you get out of being a CPA?
Yeah, so almost immediately I would, I was doing the CPA thing, and I'd meet people and they'd say, well, what do you do? And I'd say, well, I'm an accountant. And they'd go, really? Are you sure you're in the right business? And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm not. So enough people said that. And I think one of the things that I've learned all throughout my life is a lot of times I would go and I would do something and, could I do it? Yes. Could I do it well? Not really. Did I really enjoy it all that much? Not really. And so I really learned to appreciate that there are people in all of these walks of life that are really good at what they do. I was not. I think the thing I loved about being a CPA was that I got to walk alongside people and help them plan their life in a financial sense. But the amount of sitting that you do as a CPA, I mean, I was working, there were a lot of weeks that I would work, probably on average, I would work around 60 to 70 hours a week. And at the high season, I would work, 80 to 90 hours, something like that.
Dang.
And it was a lot of sitting, and it was not a lot of client interaction. And you know me. I mean, I love to mix it up. I like to have fun, all that sort of stuff. And so I did that for 3 years. And at the end of the 3 years, I was just kind of like, is this what I want to do long term? And I decided it wasn't. And at that time, I really had no responsibilities. I was just a single guy. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to go into real estate, now's the time to do it, because I had heard that real estate, especially on the brokerage side, which is what I do, kind of helping people make the transaction happen, it's all commission. And so you go from a very stable job, and my dad, who tends to be he's very safety conscious and like making sure things work out, he was really worried for me because he's like, well, you're going to be going from this really stable job and you're going to be jumping into this thing that you have no connections or very few connections, and you're going to have to earn your keep. I don't know if you can do that, And I was like, well, no time like the present. So my first year in real estate, I made $20,000 gross commissions. It's not even after expenses.
Yeah.
So it was a tough start, but obviously I make a lot more than that now, and have all sorts of fun times in that. But when I started, it was rough.
Dang. Yeah. And going from a stable paycheck to basically like a freelance almost kind of way of living is pretty difficult. I've definitely struggled with that. How many years did it take you, do you think, until you reached a place where you felt like you were stable in this career?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that and I think this is one of the driving forces for me just as a person, is I never really feel stable. I'm always like, man, the market could dry up tomorrow. That's not really true, but that's kind of how I feel inside. And so I'm constantly driving. But I would say probably when I felt like things are stable enough that I can, take my foot off the gas a little bit, probably wasn't until maybe mid last year, something like that.
Yeah.
And that was because I started kind of, getting high on my own supply, so to speak. I started buying some homes and using those as rentals. And so then I got the rental income from that. And so that income now outpaces the daily or the monthly paycheck I pay myself. I keep a huge amount in reserves, but the paycheck that I pay myself on a monthly basis is a lot less now than what my rentals make. And so now I feel, pretty good about that. So I'd say that was probably like 5.5 years in. But I just, my life is marked by like, I'm constantly striving to be better and do something new and meet new people and all that sort of stuff. If that makes sense.
How do you think that drive was developed in you? Is that from your dad, or where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, I definitely think it's familial. My mom has done a great job of kind of like keeping track of the genealogies and all that sort of stuff. And on both sides of my family, we've all been, really, there's always been people who have been driving and striving, and even from the great grandparents that came over here in the first place, from Europe area. I think that's always been just a mark of our family as being very driven. Both my parents, kind of in their own way, both my parents are very opposite. So my dad is very cerebral. If he says something, it's gold because he's mulled it over 100 times in his head. And when it comes out, he meant to say it. My mom, on the other hand, very way more extroverted than me. She loves to be political. She loves to be out there. She loves people and social situations and relationships. And she's also very driven in a very relational sense. I think both of them in their own way kind of bring that drive.
Yeah. Have you found it hard to sustain your drive, or is that something that's just always there for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to be more of sometimes I feel like I'm a feeler, if that makes sense. I'm about half and half. Again, my mom is more on the feeling side of things, and my dad's very cerebral and very logical. And so I go back and forth. And so there have been plenty of times in life where I'm just like not motivated, low energy, all those sorts of things. And usually what I find in those situations, and it's one of the things that I like to give back to others, which is why I try to have positive energy when I'm around others, is I really struggled to figure out what I wanted to do in life. I really struggled to understand even what life was about and why we do the things we do and all these sorts of things. So I've thought about a lot of these things very deeply. And so I like to help others find that path as well. And what I found, and what I would tell your viewers, is that, and this was just for me, I found that most of the time I actually knew what I wanted to do. And I think most people have a vision of what they want their life to look like. But what happens is that when we're a child, like when you talk to children, oh, they want to go to the moon. They want to find aliens. They want to be a rock star, right? Like they have no boundaries on life. And then what happens, I think, as we get older, I think we gain trauma and PTSD and these sorts of things.
Yeah,
and
conditioning.
Oh yeah, we get conditioned. And there's a lot of like, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, is like society is always trying to make sure, hopefully, that we're being useful and we're bringing something to society, right? But in doing that, a lot of times what society will do is it will put boundaries on you and say like, hey, Brian, that's great that you want to be an astronaut, but like, only like 5 people get to be astronauts.
Or it's like no one from where we're from, or from our family, or from our culture has ever been an astronaut. What makes you think, or that you should? Yeah, those kinds of things. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And then they say, well, Brian, what about just like being a blacksmith? Why don't you just work at the family store? And there's nothing
Get a
wrong.
safe job.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. And I actually have a really good friend, super successful. I won't out him or anything, but I'll just say he's a super successful guy. And I remember he was kind of going through a period of time like that I had gone through. And so, being a friend, I said, hey, and this is one of my favorite questions to ask is I'll tell somebody, hey, if you could do anything you wanted, you'd be successful. Money's not an object. Okay. So you're kind of removing, what you're doing is in this question, you're removing all the barriers that we all generally have, right? Oh, I won't be successful at it. It's stupid, right? So I'll say, if everybody thought it was the most amazing thing, you knew you were going to be successful and money wasn't an object, what would you do? Don't even think about it. Just tell me. And you know what? Most people, they'll tell you right away. And this buddy of mine, I remember him telling me, he's like, I just want to be a high school baseball coach. And I mean, this guy is super successful. And he's like, if it came down to it, I just want to be a high school baseball coach, right? And it's like, I think that so many of us is that there's something we really want to be, is something we want to do, but we just feel like it's unrealistic. We feel like it's stupid. We feel like we'll never make money at it. And so then we end up being unhappy. We end up being unmotivated. And it's not for lack of a vision in like life, or not for lack of something that we know we would like to do, but there's a proverb that talks about, for lack of vision, the people perish, right? So if you don't have that vision of what you want to be, then it's really hard to find the motivation to do it. So I don't know if you found that to be true.
Yeah. Basically just kind of drifting, It's like a term that I read in a book recently. It was all about drifting. It was Outwitting the Devil was the book title, by Napoleon Hill. And it just talks about, basically the tactics of the devil or your mind causing you to drift so it can keep you in this safe place where there's not a lot of risk. And if you're drifting in the ocean, like you don't know where you're going or use the tools to get to where you need to get to, like it's going to be a rough journey. Maybe you end up somewhere all right. Maybe you don't, but most likely odds are against you in that situation. So yeah, having a purpose, which, I feel like society's like, yeah, find your purpose. But I think some people really don't know,
I think there are some who don't, for sure.
Yeah. And I believe in what you're saying too, though. It's like maybe they really do know, but the option that they really want, they really can't see it becoming possible. So they don't ever even really attempt that. So I think there's a lot of truth in that. And so it's kind of a blend maybe of both, where from my perspective, it's like sometimes, like for me lately, I've been really like struggling with that. Like, what is my purpose? What's my purpose for city chapters? What, where am I going in life? I'm going to be turning 35 next month. And I feel like I'm nowhere near where I thought I would be in life at this age. learning to have grace for that too. And then also, I heard some good advice from Bedros Keuilian in his book Man Up. He was like, to find your purpose, you need to take action, and you need to start doing something. You can't just be just wallowing around, drifting around, just hoping your purpose is just gonna smack you in the face. Your
Amen
purpose
to that.
is given to you through action, and so that's something that I've been taking into effect too. And then I was listening to Jocko Willink this morning on one of his podcasts, little clips of him talking about a guy that he knew that was struggling in life, not sure what to do because he was going through a divorce. All these different things were happening. And he's like, you need to start walking. And he was like using this analogy of you, like all of a sudden you wake up in the middle of these dark woods. You don't know how you got there, but you're there. And it's not going to do you any good to just be standing there looking like, how the hell am I here? What am I going to do? How am I going to get to a safe place? You can't just stand there and think about it. You got to start walking, start taking action. And so, yeah, I mean, ultimately, to find your purpose, it's like you got to take steps forward to whatever even small inclination you may have of what that could be. So that's definitely something that I'm, starting to engage in again. For me. It's like, okay, I don't exactly know. I know it has something to do with city chapters. So that's why I've been like re-engaging at scheduling podcasts, taking this great opportunity that Brennan's given me and sponsoring this. Like, he believes in me. There's people that believe in what I do, and I can get in my own head and doubt that,
Absolutely.
And so it's just about like fucking showing up again, and being okay with like a shoddy intro. I mean, it probably isn't as bad as I think it is,
No,
but
it's not that bad.
That's how I am though, like I'm like letting go of this aspect of perfection and just doing the work and showing up and like knowing like it doesn't need to, I don't need to control every aspect, and just, move forward so that I can help find my purpose. Cause I believe like being able to talk to people like you in this podcast, like this gets me near my purpose. And I always feel it when I'm in here, and just like the wisdom that you've already shared, it's like, man, people need to know people are like this emotionally intelligent in Spokane, that we have great thinkers here. And, we have a lot to be proud of in this city.
Oh, big time.
So,
Big time. No, Spokane it's an amazing place. And thank you for sharing that. I mean, your authenticity is something I really, really appreciate. One of the many things I appreciate about you. But I mean, to your point, one of the things when I was struggling to figure out what I want to do, one of the things my dad said, which was really influential at the time, is he said, just what you said, do something. Because here's what you're going to find out. You do something and you're going to find out really quickly whether you like it or not. And here's the beauty, is that when you really get cerebral about it, let's say you get into a job and you go, oh, I hate this. Okay. And it's nothing against Fred Meyer. Fred Meyer was a fine employee for the 1 month that I was there. But cutting fruit at 4 a.m. in the morning, I did not like that. Number one, waking up at 3 a.m. to get to work on time was brutal. But now, obviously, I learned some fun skills. I probably could cut a watermelon with like the machete that they gave me in like less than a minute. I could get it down to cubes for you. Like, awesome barbecue skill, right? Is that what I wanted to do with my life? Hell to the no. So did I learn an awesome skill? Yes. But what did I learn? Working in this basically back office thing wasn't fun for me. It wasn't fun to wake up that early. I didn't feel like I was making a difference in people's lives. Well, right? I just said part of my purpose, making a difference in people's lives. I learned that by doing something. So a lot of times, like you said, there's so much wisdom in doing something. And even if you don't like it, do the opposite of that, right? You do something and you hate it. Oh, I didn't like not being around people. My purpose may have something to do with being around people. Great, right? So now I got this, and then, like I said, waking up early. Okay, I need to find a job where I don't have to wake up early most days. Okay, find a job that's during the day, right? And you do that enough and you can really start narrowing it down, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's just kind of like, just gauging different experiences, learning more what's fitting for you.
Oh, big time. Well, the other thing too is that I think a lot of times we overcomplicate life, especially when you tend to be more cerebral. I'm more cerebral.
I am.
You're highly cerebral, and like there's an aspect of life that is like very practical, and I think the beauty of your mindset and my mindset and being a little bit more cerebral is that's a connection to kind of the spiritual side of life. The way I look at, I tend to be more of a religious, spiritual guy. And like, I think that there's something beyond us, right? And so when we sit and we engage with that, that's when we get very cerebral. But there's an old saying of like, don't be so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good, right?
Yeah.
And so people who are cerebral tend to struggle with the practical things like wake up on time, get ready for work, eat the same thing, right? You got to eat breakfast, you got to show up on time. You got to do some of the same tasks that you don't want to do. Like I was thinking about this week is that, one of the things that really drives me in my work is that I love the freedom, right? Like one of my big things, and this is a cool exercise to do. This was a friend of mine that used to hang out with a little bit more, but her dad was a psychologist. And one of the things he would do, and this was a really cool exercise, try it sometime. I don't know if you're confident enough to do it on the podcast here, but basically you think of you think of one animal, okay? You just sit and you go, okay, what's my first animal? Okay, got it. Okay, then what's your second animal? Got it. Okay, what's my third animal? Got it. What comes to your mind? And when I did this, I'll reveal my animals here. When I first did this, and this is not like something that you always think of the same animal or like, this is a deterrent, this is not astrology or something like that. What it is it's what is your mindset now? And it gives you some idea into what you're thinking. So my first animal was a T-Rex.
There we go.
Yeah. My second animal was a Doberman Pinscher dog. And then my third animal was a bird of some type. I don't know if it was an eagle or what it was, but it was a bird. So the first animal is how you perceive yourself. That's kind of wild, isn't it? T-Rex is a little much. So I haven't fully unpacked that, but whatever, T-Rex, right?
Yeah.
So then the second animal is how others tend to perceive you.
Yeah.
And then the third animal is what you're striving to become or what's most important to you. And so in those, the third one was one that I always remember is like the bird, like freedom, flight, getting out of oneself.
Ascension,
ascension, those sorts of things. So that's something I've carried with me to this day is like one of the things that's really important to me is freedom. And a lot of the reasons that I do the things that I do, and I subject myself to the long hours or the tough situations or the hard clients to work with sometimes, is because by doing that, I build this life and these means so that I can do the things I really want to do, be free, make a difference in people's lives. Like I just love seeing others reach that ascension, others reach that or reach for that ideal self, right? And so that's the driving force in my life is to you'll never really attain it, and that's like what life is about is you keep striving for that, but striving for being your best self and making a positive impact on the community, and then to see others reach that as well, because I don't think there's any happier or better place to be than being the best self that God has for you to be and to impact everyone around you in that same way, if that makes sense.
To me, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense to me. I think that for me, like a concept that I've developed is especially for being a man, and I mean a man in the essence of like you have total confidence in who you are and how you live.
You have a frame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that differs per person, per man,
Widely,
you know. Same thing with a woman. Like you're going to live in accordance with what you've seen as being that truest essence of what you believe a woman needs to be. But I feel like there is a lot of people that do try to live that, but we obviously are surrounded by a lot of people that don't give two fucks about any of that, which is unfortunate, but I think that's probably just the way of the world. It probably has always been that way amongst humans. You have,
There's an aspect of it.
yeah, I like even way back in the day, there was people that were doing shady stuff in the caves. And then there was guys that were like, you know, no, we're not going to stand for that.
Absolutely.
You know, so, but for me, like, and what I'm trying to accomplish as a human being, as a man that I want to be, is like living in accordance with what I see are my truths of what I need to live by to be a man. You know what I mean? No matter how big or small they are. Now, the thing too that I've had to learn is like having grace for the times that I do not meet that criteria that I have, because I have such high standards that you know, I have developed high standards. I don't think I did at one time. I mean, there's probably people that know me from my past that are like, bro, fuck you for saying that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that guy had no, like, I used to live a messed up life for sure. But I never was okay with it. Deep down, I was just really hurt, and I was, you know, just lashing out because of really a lack of guidance, I think, that I didn't have in my life at that time. But as I've developed, you know, into my 30s and you know, in my late 20s, I started developing some of these concepts, mainly when I, you know, the first concepts came when I stopped drinking for a year. I was about 27, 28. And like one thing that I came to my mind was like, no matter how big or small something is, if it's not going to help you be the person you want to be, you have to get rid of it.
Absolutely. Yep. I'm a huge proponent of that.
And so that's how you like gain momentum, and you can really start getting that progress. And you can do it for some time, and sometimes you backlapse on it and you fall back and you have to restart that process. And but it's just the continuation of always like getting back on track and giving it a go again, and just not giving up because you failed however many times, you know. And that's something that's been popping up a lot with things that I'm reading and stuff. It's like a lot of people that are successful, I keep hearing them say things like, the only reason I made it here is because I just didn't give up.
Oh, absolutely.
I just didn't quit retrying and retrying and retrying and retrying until I was able to get to a decent place. And it's not like they don't have to keep trying now. And there's even been a lot of people that are, you know, seemingly successful that have been talking about just years that they're not happy with themselves, their performances, even though they have all these things. So it's like a lesson to me is just understanding that it's just about the process. You know, you hear things like that and they can seem so surface level until you really maybe experience it more to understand like how deep the aspect of saying it's about the process and just being in the process than it is about trying to be perfect. You know,
well, you can't be perfect. And here's the other thing. And I just had a realization on your podcast, Bobby. So here you go. You get to have one of my, as I sit here and think about this, is that I was thinking about it yesterday, but it is making sense in terms of the animals I chose. So nobody will be more loving or more tyrannical to yourself than you will be. Especially since you're cerebral. I'm the same way. I was thinking about this yesterday. I was just like, there's nobody in my life who's really like, Brian, you're doing a terrible job. But I'll wake up and I'll just be like, you're a piece of shit. What are you doing? You're not meeting your full potential. And I realized that. And I was just like, so much of it is like there's something in that that's, in my opinion, good, right? Like
It can
I'm
be.
very driven,
Yeah.
and part of drive is you're not satisfied with what you're doing now. So I wouldn't give up not being satisfied, but there's a psychologist I've listened to, and he'll say, you know, you have to, in some respect, as an individual, you have to treat yourself like you would treat others, right? Where it's like I would never say that to somebody unless they were truly a terrible person. Like the average person, I'm not going to say, hey, you're a piece of shit. But I say that to myself all the time in my head, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, you have, like you say, you have to have grace, and you have to be able to say, hey, you're doing a good job, Bobby.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Brian, hey, you're doing a great job. I mean, look at where you were
Yeah.
5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 days ago,
Mm-hmm.
right? And part of that is a struggle that you have to go through, and I know you know that. And part of it, and we've talked about this before, is it's who you surround yourself with. Because if you're surrounding yourself with other people who are driven and who are successful and who are moving forward and who are going and doing things, you can't help but want to strive to be like that, right? Even if it's just a minutia of what they're doing. And that's a huge part of I give to my success is like my parents and my grandparents and my siblings and my friends and my colleagues and even my clients. I mean, I have plenty of clients that I just look at what they're doing and I'm like, you are kicking butt. Let's keep going. Like, I want to do what you're doing, right? And so and I think that's a big part of humanity. There's a lot of other animals in the animal kingdom that are very social. And the more social an animal group is, the more successful they are generally as animals, right? And I think that's very much true with human beings as animals, is that like we're highly social. And the more isolated we feel and the more isolated we become, whether that's mentally, emotionally, or even physically, I think that's to our detriment.
Yeah. I agree. I think that there's times where you need to retreat, but then there's the times where that introverted lifestyle aspect can take a hold and you get too comfortable in that, and you can make up excuses of why you're introverted because the world is this way or whatever. But ultimately, for me, because I came a lot more introverted throughout the years, especially after COVID and stuff, and like breaking out of that kind of habit that I created of being more introverted and learning how to find ways to get outside of, because it used to just be going out and drinking, partying. That was how I always socialized with the people growing up. And for me, that was always a hard thing because I always felt like this deep yearning to do great things, but I got caught up with people that partied a lot and I didn't really know how to, I guess, get out of it for a long time, even though I wanted to, or I would try to be maybe encouraging to my friends, but I just couldn't seemingly get out of it. I finally have now, and I think most of those friends probably have too. They've all, grown up outside of that era that we were in, yeah, I can wish I was more disciplined or smarter in my younger age. I wasn't, and there's a lot of lessons that I've gained from that and boundaries now that I've developed because I know what I just can't be around anymore. I just, so yeah, like separating myself from that, it was and it still is, it's been a pretty lonely era of my life because I don't drink at all. I don't even want to have a drink or go out for beers or anything like that. Or, I don't watch sports, so I don't go over to watch sports with the boys. Like that's not for me what equates to a good well time spent, for me. That's how I feel. So it's like trying to learn what it is that I need to do to, socialize, be effective with how I am in the community, in my city, with this brand. It's difficult to hone in on, but I definitely believe, like you're saying, like getting out there, socializing, it's gonna help you with a lot of different aspects if you're just trying to fight it mentally alone. There's only so much I feel like we really can do alone. I mean, highly driven individuals maybe can accomplish that, but ultimately they're probably going to be pretty lonely too. And I think that's an aspect that comes with any high achiever, where you do have this sense of loneliness, because mostly a lot of them talk about it. It's just the process you have to go through to continually find where you're gonna be great in, and there's nobody else that can like really do that for you. You're gonna have support systems, and you can be around brothers that are pushing you because they do great things themselves. But most of the time, your brothers aren't going to be able to be in the trenches with you, helping you do that great thing that you're out doing all the time, because they're doing their thing in their trenches, building their great things.
No, you're 100% right. Is that there's an aspect of humanity that is social, that is we need others, but there's also an aspect of each person fights their own battle, right? And they talk about this in the faith community. They talk about this as like each of us has our own like burdens we have to carry. There's actually a verse in the Bible that talks about, and it's not translated very well in English, but it talks about how we need to bear our own burdens even as we bear the burdens of others, right? And they use the same word, burdens, but actually those two words are very different in the original language it was done. So the first one, when it's talking about bearing your own burdens, is talking about the version like a knapsack, so like a backpack, right? Totally doable. We can all do our own backpack and carry it around and do what we need to do. The second version is talking about is a millstone, right? And if you know anything about millstones, I don't know very much about them. I've seen pictures of them in books, but millstones are literally too heavy for one person to carry on their own. So when it says bear your own burdens, backpack, even as we bear the burdens of others, millstones. There are certain things in your life, there are certain things in my life that are too heavy for us to do, and they're not designed for us to do those on our own. And in those cases, we need to have our buddies.
But man, I feel like, I don't know. I have friends where we try to do that for each other. We want to do that for each other, but it never really fucking happens. You know what I mean? I don't know. I feel like everybody feels that way too.
Oh, 100%. We all feel those emotions.
I feel like we just really don't have a brotherhood developed that's like true. You know what I mean? Like,
I know what you mean.
It's surface
100%.
level brotherhood. We really want to be there for each other. Our intentions are even to do that. But when it really comes down to it, it's like, it's too spotty. We all have too much going on to get around the campfire every night together. And that's what we used to do. And that's what we yearn for. You know what I mean? Way back in the day, you were with your tribe every single day. Every single day you were with men and elders too. Like, we don't see elders ever in our society anymore unless you have a great relationship with your dad, which most of us don't. You know? So it's like there is none of that fuel or that there's none of that nutrients, that soul nutrients that we need as men and women. Women have their own individual. I can't really fully understand that. I'm not a woman. But I know from a man aspect of like, you know, there used to be initiation in the manhood. There used to be all these different things. Now you have 40, 50-year-olds that don't know if they're men yet. You know, or are totally, obviously, are not men. We experience that all the time on the soccer field.
Oh, big time.
It's a big part of why I stopped playing. I just couldn't take how foolish people are when they should be acting like men. And it's just crazy to me. You know, there's competition, which I get. You know, sports is the practice and the ritual of death, but like, you need to learn how to actually be able to deal with that when it's not really about death and you're acting like you're gonna do something completely reckless to hurt somebody because you're down a point or two.
Yeah.
Like that shit is just like, what are we doing? I have a hard time dealing with it. And you know me, I'll grab you by the throat.
Oh yeah. Well, and again, that's
Because if you really want to take it to the ritual of death, we can really go there.
100%.
And that's just how I am as a man. So I just, once I feel engaged that way, you're threatening me. Okay, you want to really threaten me? I'm going to really threaten you.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
just
and
how I try to be better. But
yeah. Well, but in some respects, it's a self-defense, in my opinion. What you've done is you've put a very big barrier in there. You're like, hey, the reason you're doing the grab by the throat is to de-escalate, to show that, hey, yo,
yeah,
like I'm taking this seriously. You, oh, well, I wasn't thinking that. Okay, well, it sounded like you were. So de-escalate, right? And I think there's a lot to be learned. Number one, I watch a ton of documentaries. I'm really into documentaries. And in particular, I went through a phase where I was watching a ton of documentaries on the animal kingdom.
Yeah.
And I think one of the problems with our society, and I'll put this on myself too, problem with me, is that we aren't around animals much anymore. And the ones we are around are domesticated into our civilization. And one of the things you look when you see like the regular, like when you look out to other animals, there's all these rituals that animals do just in life, as well as in de-escalation. Like one of the things is we kind of laugh at it, right? We watch these dominance displays, right?
Yeah.
When you really study what a dominance display is, particularly among males in these other species, they do dominance displays so that they don't actually have to fight.
Yeah.
Because the reality is that even if you're the bigger and stronger animal, all I got to do is one claw goes into your fur and it doesn't heal. You get an infection, you die. I don't have to break your bones. I don't have to do any of these stuff. And so a lot of these dominance displays are so that like, hey, I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I will kill you, but I really don't want to fight either. So why don't you back off? And the other one's like, yeah, okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
And only in very rare situations do they actually do a dominance or actually go into a fight, because there's a chance that both of you could be injured. And the same can be said for the male species in humans, is that I think I think COVID especially, but just our society in general, has taken away a lot of those dominance displays that we used to do, or even just the physical altercations that men would have, that they'd be physical, but it'd be a wrestling match. Like I even remember in high school, and I'm not going to say this was a positive thing, but I remember I was in high school in one class and these two guys were really good friends and they started harping at each other in class. And I remember the teacher, who was a male also, was watching this whole thing go down. And then all of a sudden these guys just end up in a wrestling match on the floor. And they weren't throwing punches or anything. They're just wrestling. And then finally they just stop. And they're just like, breathing heavy on the floor. And the teacher didn't do it. He just goes, "Are you guys done?" And they were like, "Yeah, we're done." He's like, "You know where you need to go." And they both got up and they walked to the principal's office. And like, they were really good friends, but they just like, whatever it was, the testosterone got going and they had a disagreement and they wrestled, and it didn't go to guns. It didn't go to knives. It didn't go to breaking a bottle and stabbing each other. It was just like, they needed to wrestle. They needed to get their aggression out, and then they were good. And like, after that, I never saw them fight again. I'm sure they did, but it's like, there's this aspect of like, especially I think among men, is that I think in many other respects, there were some things that were not positive about masculinity, or weren't positive about the way that men express themselves. But I think we've gone as a society so far over to the other side that we don't let men biologically express themselves the way they need to be expressed. And that leads up to a lot of pent up aggression. It leads up to a lot of this pent up energy. And then it just pents up, and either the men engage in that, and in a negative aspect, they engage in it in a positive aspect. They have positive outlets. That's why I continue to do soccer, softball, a lot of these things that are very physical, because it gets that energy out of me, positive and negative. Or they engage in it in a really negative aspect, where you get bad altercations with their significant other, bad altercations with their children, bad altercations with some guy in a bar. And you're just like, where does that come from? Well, I think there's a natural biological need for men to get their energy out. And if you can't get that out in a positive way, you may get it out in a negative way if you're not self-aware. That
For
makes sense.
sure. No, it makes perfect sense. But yeah, I mean, as a society, like, yeah, if you want to, you can get into like wrestling, jiu-jitsu, MMA,
Absolutely.
but like as a whole, like very few people practice that. And that's like the reason that I am and have been interested in jiu-jitsu. I haven't really engaged in it yet, but it's just that aspect of, I think men do need to engage in physical contact and competition, but it needs to be in a way that is, it's organized in some aspect, right? Or yeah, I'll just say organized for lack of a better word.
Well, fruitful
So-
might be another word. It's a fruitful use of aggression or
Yeah.
energy.
But understanding that, it's a agreed engagement, not where, like, for me in soccer, it's like, yo, that's like, there's physical contact and then there's reckless contact.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's
Yep.
that's where I, once reckless contact starts happening with me, that's why I will choke somebody, because I'm like, bro, you're about to fucking hurt me. So this is where it's gonna go. Like, what you're doing is not the game to me. You know what I mean? And if you want to play that way, where's it gonna lead? It's not gonna lead to anything good, and it's not gonna prove anything amongst us. Prove it by making a goal. Prove it by real defense. Prove it.
Yeah, or playing me tough in a way that's not going to potentially injure me. Because again,
Exactly.
that's a very primal
Yeah.
thing you're talking about. Is like, because not as much today, but it can happen today, is that an injury could cause you to lose your ability to provide for you. And what if you have a family? And so all of a sudden, it's like, so I think what you're dealing with is a very primal urge of like, don't harm me.
Oh, definitely.
And especially
man.
if it, like,
Definitely.
it's one thing if, like you said, we've agreed to have this altercation, but if it's like within the confines of the rules in the game, now all of a sudden you're going beyond that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I have something to say about that.
Yeah,
and
for
you know
sure.
me, I tend to bark more than I bite with stuff like that. So, but I do a lot of barking out there if somebody really crosses the line with myself or somebody else, because, like you said, I mean, we all have to go to work the next day. That's what I tell people all the time. It's like, look, do I try to be super aggressive out there? Not as much now, because I'm like, these guys have to go to work and I got to go work tomorrow. Like, they're
Yeah,
like,
I don't ever come there aggressive when I did.
I used to.
back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, since we started playing together,
Yeah.
like, I play hard and I'll play an aspect of physicality for sure.
For sure.
But
yeah.
not to fucking just wreck somebody.
Yeah. Or cause injury,
You know,
because
but, yeah.
yeah.
But, mostly it happens when people start losing, they start doing some foul shit. And it's like, it's just so petty to me. That's where we're at as a society. I know that thing has always existed too.
Oh,
Men-
100%.
That's
We're
always
human beings.
But,
Yeah.
there's always men that have looked at men like that, like, you're petty. You're a fool. Because you can't control your emotions in a way that is going to be suitable for us to continue to compete, So,
Well, and I think it goes to the broader thing in society too. I mean, we've set up, games are very useful for human beings in general, but
definitely.
for, I think, male aggression, because it's like, we can go to war literally, or we can go to war in business, and I can try to outmaneuver you, and that's one of the reasons I really love what I do, is that in all aspects, investments, money, all this sort of stuff, is that it's a gamified way to go to war with somebody where nobody's really dying, thankfully, right? If the game is played well, hopefully in an economy that's growing, then everybody has a chance. Now, I may be doing better than the next person, or somebody may be doing better than me, but we all get a piece of that pie that continues to grow, right? And so, that's why I'm a huge proponent of doing what I do, and I love to get just people in general involved in the game of real estate or in the game of making money, because I think it's a really great way to kind of like keep peace in society, right? Or for people to be able to use their gifts in a way that they get to then have some gain from that so that they can live. And not everybody wants to live a high class life or a really crazy rich life. Some people are very happy to just live kind of humdrum. I have my house, I have my family, I have a car, I have a couple of things I like to do for hobbies, and like that's all I need. And they're happy to do that. And so like giving everybody an opportunity to do that in a free market society, I think is very important for the overall health and aggression. I mean, just what we're talking about.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I feel that we're just doing such a poor job at giving men the tools to be able to channel what they're dealing with. But once again, I guess it also comes to the aspect of if you want to figure that out, you can. There's nothing stopping you from figuring that out. It's just not really given to us. It's not given to us in
it's
schooling.
not easy. No.
It's, you have to be able to say, I'm going to go find the answer and the solutions and seek out these things, because the government's not going to help us with that. Our local government leadership overall is not really helping with that. I'm not saying there's not tools or aspects out there, but I'm just saying it's not prevalent to us.
Right.
It's not made very accessible as far as, it's just not accessible. Like jiu-jitsu, that costs money. These things, and it's not cheap. So
and it's time that you cannot spend earning money. So then you have to earn more money during the time that you're actually earning money to be able to afford that good outlet.
I mean, like, I feel like your insurance should pay for your jiu-jitsu as a man. Yeah, you're going to get injuries, but like we're talking about overall health insurance. Like men need to, whatever that is, like they'll pay for like maybe a gym membership.
Sure.
Which that's, I guess that can be helpful. But I feel like there's, an aspect where I need to start seeking out different ways to maybe engage in physical contact in a properly channeled way.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying like, jiu-jitsu, like dudes, get hurt all the time in that. Some dude gets too crazy about it and it happens. Like it happens. So it's something that you can't maybe, avoid. But, I guess what I'm talking about is I like to be around men that are highly competitive, but there's also the aspect of respect that comes with them too. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
respect is male currency in many respects. You know what I mean? Is that like that's what many men constantly seek: respect. You like me because of what I can bring to the table. And I think a lot of what you're talking about too is that men generally are very mission focused. And one of the I experienced many of the same things you do. I think every man does, is that it's really hard to form male relationships outside of some sort of mission. The mission is what brings you together. It keeps you focused. It gives you something to kind of do, because most of the guys that I know aren't just going to sit down and start chatting. Most of my conversation starters with men are, hey, what do you do for a living? Oh, okay. I might need a concrete worker someday. I might need a plumber someday. I might need somebody who's in the financial services sector. I might need somebody who's a mental health counselor someday, right? All these things. And so I think part of the key, maybe not only for yourself, but for men in general, is that I find the most success when I find men who are on a mission and I join that mission. And then in that, and like you said, it has to be authentic. It can't be some like, our mission is to meet today and have coffee with one another and get to know each other. That's not a mission. That's like, at least for me, right?
Yeah, for
My
sure.
mission is like, I want to go conquer something. Like that's very much and I think that's a general thing for men too, is that we tend to be conquerors. We tend to be going to find something to subdue, to turn into something useful, take something that's wild and turn it into something that's domestic, right? And so the more we can get into situations where we find men and not only find men, but say, hey, do you want to go on this mission? And then that comes full circle back to what we started the podcast with, which is purpose, right? Mission is purpose and purpose is mission. It's like, we're going to do this thing. Do you want to come along? One of my favorite stories in the Bible, and I don't know if I've shared this one with you before, but it was when David, who in the Old Testament, King David, he was basically in exile. So he was the king's son's friend, and then the king felt threatened by him, and so the king was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna kill this guy," and so he exiles himself. And there's this verse where it talks about how he goes out into the wilderness, and then it says he gathered these men to himself, and they became the mighty men. Okay, the mighty men of David, and these guys were like his ride or die through the rest of his life. They became his warriors, they became his tribe, all this sort of stuff. And so you might think to yourself, well, what were these men like before they met David? And when I first read it, when I read about the mighty men, you just assume, oh, these guys were badasses from the beginning, right? They were former military ops, super successful guys. No. When you read it, and forgive me, I'm not super great with, remembering scriptures, but basically what it talks about is like anyone who is in distress, anyone who is in debt, any man who was despairing of life, those were the guys that went out and met him and became his ride or die.
Yeah.
And so in many respects, these guys were the dregs of society. These were the guys you see homeless out on the corner. These were the guys who were super in debt and not very motivated. These were the guys that, their wives divorced them because they're like, these guys are free. He has no purpose in life, right?
Yeah.
And these guys ended up, you read some of the stories about these mighty men. At one point, David, in this story, he goes, there's this encampment of the enemy, okay? Enemy dudes all around, a whole army. And they're camped around a well. And all David goes, he goes, I wish I had some water from this well. He doesn't command his guys to do anything. He just says, gosh, it'd be great if, probably around a campfire with these bros. He's like, it'd be awesome if we could get some water from this well that this army is camped around. These dudes, without his prompting, go fight their way in to get to this well, take water from it, bring it back so he can drink it. Mm-hmm. That's the type of stuff that dudes do. And maybe we don't. You and I wouldn't do that, but
I would. I'm down.
Yeah, right.
I'm down for that kind of
right?
stuff.
That's the sort of stuff you sit around with your buddies and you're like, what would be cool? There's a restricted area. What if we snuck in and got a piece of it and then brought it back out? Does that sound like a good idea? And you're all like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea, right? And so, but that's what I'm saying is that the reason they came together is here's this guy out in the middle of the wilderness. And he's just very purposeful guy. King David was super purposeful. He was going around and doing all this stuff. And he was like, yo, y'all want to come out and do some stuff? And they're like, yeah, I got nothing else going on. I'm in debt up to my eyeballs over here. I was thinking man, I don't really have much to live for. Oh, this sounds fun. And so it's in that mission. And sometimes it's around another dude. Sometimes it's hey, we want to accomplish something. But it's I'm a really big believer that men need to have a purpose. They need to have a mission. And then that's how you kind of form your community. And that's where you get your ride or dies. And maybe you even don't even have that mission anymore. Maybe that mission is past, right? And you've moved on to other things, but you remember those experiences you had of breaking in amongst the enemy and getting the water, going into the restricted area when you're not supposed to, going and oh man, we went and we bought this piece of property and we turned it into this amazing development. That's something, it gives you something to talk about. And every time you talk about that memory, you get those emotions again. So maybe that's part of what you need to find is instead of finding a group of dudes, find a mission that's worth doing. And say, I want to go do this mission. Anybody want to join me?
Yeah.
And you'd probably be surprised, not only like the number of guys that would be interested in it, but the type of dudes where you're like, oh, I never would have hung out with that dude. But I'll tell you one more story. I was reading a book in high school. My high school biology teacher was a science guy who was super interested in a variety of things. And his name was Mr. Vixie. But he had us read this book about, I think it was Shackleton, the guy who went and did exploration in Antarctica down south. And I remember in this book, he kind of described Shackleton, who's this guy who's a captain, kind of a wild adventurer, this sort of guy. And so he's going, I want to go down to Antarctica. Who wants to go with me? So he puts this ad in the newspaper. And it was something just like most people are like, I would not sign up for that. It was really honest. It was like, look, we're going down to Antarctica. Chance of death is really high.
I know this story.
Yeah. And it's going to be this wild adventure. Who wants to come? And the response to that ad, they only had like 50 positions or I forget what it was. Yeah. But like the response was overwhelming. Like all these dudes were like, yeah, I want a chance of death.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Like they wanted to go do it.
Let's go somewhere people haven't really been.
And it's like that, that along with some of those other things, I think that epitomizes what men in particular, in general, are all about. It's like, give me a mission. Give me something impossible. Give me something where even if I die, I'm doing something amazing along the way. Like my obit, because we're all going to die. I mean, unless you're one of these guys that gets taken up by God and you don't actually die, right? It's like, we're all going to die. But what is it going to read on your tombstone one day? Who are the people that you're going to have affected along the way who are going to come and visit that tombstone at the end? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I just finished reading The Way of the Superior Man by David Dida, I think is how you say his last name. Definitely some very masculine thinking and which I like about it. I'm definitely like, knowing that I need to really step back into my my masculinity and not have any apologies about it. If you're offended, that's how you feel. But I'm gonna do what I feel I need to do because I feel like through a lot of my traumas, I started gearing away from my masculinity to like more be protective of myself and
and protective of others maybe because you're like, my masculinity got others in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, that for sure is an aspect of it. Also being scared of my masculinity and how I've hurt people and almost killed people several times. So it's like, so you start being fearful of that power of masculinity almost in a way. And trying to compensate, and I think that's like what we're all of us are really talking about. This isn't a new conversation. This talk about how, the roles are flipped. Women are being very masculine and men are being very feministic. To each their own. I don't think, whatever way you need to be for yourself, if that's how you truly have that essence, if you have that true masculine essence and you're a female, that's all good. Yeah, but whatever. Like for me, or any person that's trying to force one of those essences to more fit into what society is demanding from us, that's not right. You should be able to be and express yourself how you truly are and not have to hide your masculine or your feminine essence. And I'm definitely a blend, but I think right now it's like...
I think we're all a blend, honestly.
And I think some people lend more to one. I don't think it's possible to not be... but I think even so, there's going to be guys that are predominantly all masculine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's going to be, vice versa, whatever. So, but for me right now, and after reading that book and realizing some of the things that really touched home with me, was I need to re-step back into my masculinity, and I'm not going to apologize about it.
Nope.
I'm not going to apologize about it and how I am and what I feel my masculine energy is telling me I need to do and what I need to accomplish. And obviously a big part of that book is like your mission supersedes everything. It supersedes your relationship. And that's what a man needs. A masculine man needs a mission, needs a purpose, and that purpose comes above everything else. So yeah, I mean, like, I think my purpose definitely involves city chapters, but I haven't been able to clarify the mission and the purpose yet. Like, I'm working it out. I'm still in the process of that, taking action on it, and I think through time it'll be more revealed. But you know, I can't help but every time feel when I'm in here, and I don't know why I forget. I think it's my mind trying to steer me away from my purpose in this podcast room, because like I know this has impact, you know, just in my own life. This conversation has impact in my own life, my own purpose for my life, learning from you, your perspectives, you know, and then anybody else that does listen. You know, I know based upon feedback that I get that people really enjoy the conversations that are had on here and getting to know people they wouldn't have otherwise ever heard of probably. And, you know, so yeah, I knew that coming into this year. I was like, I had been taking some time off, and I was like, you know, feeling like, oh, what's the point of the podcast?
Absolutely.
It doesn't make money. You know, I don't have these crazy, whatever, all these doubtful thoughts that can creep in. And
and we all have them, man. We all have them all the time.
For sure. But you know, the point being is just that I was just like, nah, I'm going to start scheduling podcasts as soon as I see an opportunity with anybody that I think is got something to offer. You know what I mean? And it does not matter income. It does not matter status. It doesn't matter any of that. It just matters whether I see something that's cool inside of that person that I think is worth sharing, you know?
Absolutely.
And so, boom, I'm back, you know?
I like it.
Yeah.
I mean, a couple of observations just in what you're saying. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, being a cerebral guy, you tend to overcomplicate things.
Oh, for sure.
You literally just stated the purpose.
Yeah.
You said, I'm seeking out my masculinity and finding a good way to express that. Why couldn't city chapters in part be about that? Right? Like, in many respects, when you're doing a podcast or even in a business, like, businesses are brands, but brands typically, there's a reason that corporations are considered not human beings, but they're considered persons. Because usually a corporation starts because of an individual. Ford Motor Company, Henry Ford, you know, Elon Musk. How many has he started, right? And when you think of Starlink or anything, you don't think of Starlink by itself yet, but you think Tesla. What do you think? Elon Musk. You know, when you think of Starlink, you think Elon Musk. You think Ford. You think Henry Ford. When you think Amazon,
Jeff
for the most
Bezos,
part, people Jeff Bezos, right? When you think Microsoft,
Bill Gates,
right? So people are the brand. And then, you know, eventually some corporations have their own brand, right? Now Ford has survived Henry Ford and has aspects of him in it. Think of your, you know, podcast as you, the brand is you. I mean, people aren't showing up to just listen to a podcast. There's many of them out there. They're showing up to listen to you. And so it's like, what are you going through? Well, you're going through this masculine thing. So why not make it something about that? And what does it look like to have, what are some of the cool missions that dudes are having out there?
Yeah.
Other dudes could join. I don't know.
Well, I do look at it that way. I mean, the reason, I don't want to go too far off on me because this is about you, but just
100%.
to speak on that a little bit is like, that is why I started the podcast, to give people more of me and build a brand more around me too. And
Absolutely.
like giving people the way that I think. And, you know, I think, I don't want to say like this is a feminine aspect, but I was masculinity, I'll say it this way. Masculinity is about being in your confidence of who you are as a man and what you do.
Absolutely.
And if you're not fully in that essence, that masculine essence, you question things too much.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But when you're in your strong masculine essence, you re-engage that. There is no more question of like, oh, should I, what? You're like, no, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it regardless. And I'm going to keep pushing forward. And, you know, that's part of me getting back in my masculine essence of like, dog, stop doubting, stop questioning, stop worrying, you know, stop worrying is a big one. Like, just fucking do what you do and don't have any apologies about it to yourself either. Like, even if you make a mistake, don't feel bad about it. Like, hey, take account of it, see what it was, and keep moving forward. And that, to me, is a masculine trait. You know,
absolutely.
Like, you don't let failures deter you or make you be too emotional or in your feelings. And I'm not saying we don't need to be in touch with our emotions or our feelings, but you can't sit in those places for too long. You feel them, you take action.
Well, and the other thing I'll add to that is that, and I experienced this recently as well. I went out, I was feeling incredibly stressed with work and just, I think I mentioned to you, I was in a car accident a month ago.
Right.
So I was dealing with stuff with that. And I was just like, man, there's so much going on. I was feeling stressed. And then I met with my buddy and we're chatting and he has a lot more to be stressed out about than I do. I felt better by the end, not because he was more stressed than I was, but because I was able to offer an outlet to him. When you're on mission, we all feel pain and we're way more in tune with our pain when we're not busy. Okay. That's the reality of life, is that once you get past a certain age, like, talk to old people. I mean, they're constantly in pain, constantly. Things are breaking down, things aren't working, you know, all this sort of stuff. But the people who are the happiest in their old life are still on mission. They're their parents and their grandparents and their community members, and they're helping with this and they're helping with that and all this sort of stuff. They don't have time to think about the pain that they're in. Does that mean the pain goes away? No, it's still there. But it's like, was I still stressed after I got out? A little bit, but not nearly as stressed, because I saw a buddy and I was like, man, he's in need. I want to talk him through this. I want to chat with him. I want to talk about what's going on with life, give him an outlet, make sure he knows that if he needs anything, hey, I'm here, whatever. And like, I felt really good going away from that. You know what I mean? And so a lot of times when you're on mission, a lot of the pain and stuff, or a lot of the things that you were thinking about get replaced, right? Yeah. Those memories get replaced, those feelings get replaced, and all that sort of stuff. It's not that they go away. And the other thing I'll tell you too is that, like, you're exactly right. Being in touch with your emotions is important, because your emotions, and I learned this from several psychologists I've gone through over the years, is that, like, emotions are your body's way of communicating something that's not working.
Right.
So yes, if you're not in touch with your emotions, they're not your allies. Well, now they're your enemies. And I think I had mentioned this to you. If I haven't, please forgive me for saying it again. But I'm a guy who has visions and tends to be visionary. And so one of the visions I had once when I was kind of working through some emotions on something was that your emotions, when you're not in touch with them or when you're not listening to them properly, are literally your enemies. I mean, they're these big monsters that come and they fight you. And the more of them that there are that you're not in touch with them, the bigger the army is that you're fighting. But the funny thing is, as you get in touch with them and as you subdue those emotions, they then become your allies. Now, think about that. You're going from an army of enemies, and all of a sudden, one by one, you're picking them off. Anger, sadness, loneliness, all these sorts of things. And now they become your allies. Well, now you're building an army of emotions. Well, now the more of them you have, now all of a sudden, maybe you have a whole cadre, and now you face sadness. Sadness is on the other side. Well, you have all these other emotions to deal with that. Now you have an entire army, and you're like, sadness, come on over here. Come join we're having a party over here. You're not going to fight us. You're too small.
Yeah.
Come on in.
Yeah, definitely. I've been learning a lot of different things recently to deal with getting out of, well, not even getting out of, accepting emotional states and not looking at them like, man, it sucks that I feel this way. You know, I think that's like a natural response to when we're having negative emotions, to be like, damn, I wish I didn't feel this way, which perpetually just keeps you feeling that way.
Of course.
So, you know, taking and doing things that are going to help, you know, accept that. And one is just like compassion. Like I took a long time for me to understand when people were telling me like, dude, you're way too hard on yourself.
Yeah.
And I used to use like the excuse of like, well, you know, you just don't have the same goals as me. You don't want what I want in life.
Yeah.
And there's an aspect of that that a lot of times is true. I am like, I do want to achieve a lot in life, you know, but I think because I have been so hard on myself, that's been like a lesson that God has been trying to make me understand, is like, you can't tear yourself down. You need to build yourself up. So like when you make a failure or you don't do the right thing and you just fucking hammer yourself for it and make yourself just like, I can't believe I did that. I can't
you're
believe
a piece of shit, man. What are you doing?
Whatever that negative talk is, like, that just keeps driving you down further. If you can catch that behavior and just be like, dude, what you need right now is love. And, you know, a lot of times, and most of the time, honestly, you're not going to get that love from anybody else. No one's going to be able to give you.
There's a few people in life, hopefully.
But even so, like, you know, that can depend on where they're at in a moment in life. That can, like, if you fully just understand like self-love and not just like, oh, I want to love myself and care for myself. It literally means like taking, it could be a simple action of just like just scratching your own arm as if somebody was lovingly like caressing you.
Absolutely.
And just getting out of your head and just feeling like I am loved. You know what I mean? Like that's a simple thing. Now that, to men that are masculine, like, dude, that's feminine, and it maybe that is, because we do need that,
certainly.
But I also believe a masculine man needs that feminine energy, and sometimes it's got to be, you know, sometimes you have to give yourself that feminine, nurturing, caring that sometimes for a lot of men right now too aren't getting from women. You know, and I'm not saying that across the board. I know there's a lot of
there's a huge chunk of them that are not. That's why there's such thing as an incel.
And there's this dysfunctional. Anyway, there's a lot of great women out there. Shout out to you. I'm not coming down on women.
Not at all.
I'm not saying it to you, Brian. I'm saying it to women that listen. You know, like
no.
Just so it's clear, I'm not hating. We're all struggling in this life and trying to figure out how to have balance. But for me, like I'm saying, like there's just times recently where, you know, I make a mistake or, you know, something of that nature, and that programming will start where it's like, oh, you're not good enough, whatever, that unworthiness that will start to take place. And it's just like, dude, like right now, all you really need is love, brother. Like, you need to feel loved, so engage in feeling love and loving yourself right now, instead of this habit that I had formed over my life of just like tearing myself down because you need to be fucking better. You need to step it the fuck up. You need a, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's funny how much further like I can get myself now when I just decide like, oh, brother, like, dang, that wasn't the right decision, but you're human, brother. Like you're dealing with a world that is difficult to deal with. It's okay, man. Like, it's okay that you're not perfect. And that ultimately is helping me just like get out and back into my purpose and accepting my failures.
Absolutely. That's great, man.
Yeah.
Well,
it has been great.
There's a reason in the faith community, at least in the Christian faith community, that, you know, it goes in a hierarchy. It's you learn to love God first. Then you learn to love yourself. Then you learn to love others. And there's a reason, I think, in Scripture it says, why doesn't it just say love others? It's not what Scripture says. It says, love others as you love yourself. Yeah. Well, that assumes that you know how to love yourself.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you don't know how to love yourself, and this is the thing that I learned a lot about myself as well, is that, like, oftentimes, and where you can have grace with other people is oftentimes people love you just like they love themselves, right? And
Definitely.
and that's why a lot of people will have grace with somebody where they're like, well, they don't treat themselves very well, but they don't treat me well, but I know they treat themselves much worse, right? People will have grace for somebody like that. Where a lot of people won't have grace is if you treat yourself better than you treat others. That's where people they go, that's not right. And so it's like the journey you're going through, man. That's that's a base important thing, and I have to work through that all the time myself. It's like loving yourself. What does that mean? Because then you can naturally love others better because you've done the hard work of, in my faith tradition, it's like you love God, then you love yourself, and then you love everybody else.
And yeah, and I love that. To speak on another perspective from that too is like, if you love yourself, there's a certain threshold of love that you have, of course, right? And if people are not meeting that threshold in the way that they treat you, then you're like, I don't need that in my life.
Absolutely.
Like, of course, there's that give and balance and forgiveness and like, but there's a certain level, especially like within like relationships, especially ones that are, emotional or like real relationships. I'm getting hungry because I've been fasting today, lacking the word where people are actually together.
I am too. I haven't had breakfast yet, bro. Come on. Or lunch.
Where people are actually in a sexual relationship.
Yes.
There we go. That's what I'm trying to say. So a
Hard
lot of relationships that, involve a sexual relationship, there's a lot of dysfunction that can happen in there because people don't really love each other or love themselves, so they stay with each other in that dysfunction. But if you're a highly functional, self-caring, loving person and you end up dating somebody like that for a short time, you're going to get out probably really quick because you're going to be like, hopefully. Well, I think you will, because if you love yourself and you love, you have that threshold of how you care for yourself, you're not going to allow somebody else to treat you that way.
Absolutely.
There's a book called The Magical Kitchen by Don Miguel Ruiz, and he has an analogy in there. It's off the chapter called the Magical Kitchen. So the analogy is you own a magical kitchen in your home. Anytime you can get whatever type of food, whenever you want, however you want, how much you want.
So hungry.
Some dude or girl, in this case, for us as men, let's say a girl comes knocking on the door and she has a pizza. And she's like, hey, I'll give you this pizza, but you have to do what I tell you. You're like, girl, I'm good. Thank you.
I got the magical kitchen.
But I got a magical kitchen.
Come on.
I don't need your pizza.
Yeah.
All right. Things change. A different situation. You're broke. You don't got money. You have no food. And
no magical kitchen.
No magical kitchen. Yeah, this is gone. And girl comes knocking on your door. She's looking pretty good. She's got a good looking pizza. You know us men, when we're hungry, pizza can hit the spot real nice.
It's one of the best.
Yeah. And so you're like, yeah, all right, I'll do what you say for that pizza right now. Then she's like, well, I'll keep giving you pizza, but you got to keep doing what I tell you to do.
Of course. Yeah. Because you get used to her giving you the pizza instead of having your magical kitchen or your normal kitchen where you're making your own food. To take the analogy. Yeah, that's a great one, man.
Yeah, so you agree. And obviously the pizza represents love. If you have an abundance of love in yourself, nobody that comes along and is like, I'll love you, but you got to do what I tell you. You're not going to accept that. You're going to be like, oh, I'm good. I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm okay.
Yep.
Like, I don't need that kind of shit in my life. But if you're desperate for love, you don't have that emotion for yourself or that practice for yourself, you don't have those things, like you're gonna find yourself doing all sorts of things to feel loved by somebody else. So that's I think honestly one of the greatest analogies that have helped me in like relationships like that, where I'm like, since I've read that, if I just know what I want from love in a relationship and what I don't want and what I won't accept. And, so, yeah.
Dude, I like it. That's great. I'm gonna use that one. Not only for the magical kitchen, because I'm very hungry.
Yeah, I know, me too.
But jeez, man.
We can wrap it up. We'll close off just with more just focusing in on your business here real quick and letting the people know what you do specifically in the real estate world, where they can find you, all that kind of info.
Perfect. Okay, so what I do, I am a broker for real estate. So I help people literally broker deals, buy and sell real estate, and that can be anything. It could be a home, it could be an investment property, a rental, it could be land. I do a ton of land deals. So if anybody is looking for land out in the middle of nowhere, or land where they could build something or build a business or that sort of thing, I've kind of fallen into that. It wasn't something I set out to do, but it's kind of become my business. And I know way too much about it. So I tend to focus more on the, especially with structures, I tend to focus more in the residential side than the commercial side. If somebody does have a commercial need, I know people I can refer them to, but they're kind of two different things. And again, there's some crossover where you get some kind of smaller. I'm working on one right now with a client that's a 7-plex, which technically is considered commercial. Anything 4 units or more is considered commercial. But I can do that within my purview. But if you're talking like 2,000 unit or something like that, that's not necessarily in my wheelhouse, although I would love to help you with a 2,000 unit complex. So that's my primary thing. Like I mentioned, I do have a good background in rentals because of, I do that. I've helped my family with that and that sort of thing, but I also have my own now. So if you need advice on that, I certainly can help acquire that.
Acquiring a rental.
And then we, in our office, so I work at Windermere Manitou, which is up on the South Hill. We have a specific division that's focused on rental properties in terms of leasing. And so, if you need, if somebody needs that, that's within our family to kind of help with our family.
Like to find
office.
a family a rental? Or are you talking about the business side of it?
Yeah, so both. So on the business side of it, I can help them in acquiring and then helping them get, because the actual acquisition is what I specialize in, and then the property managers specialize in then leasing that out. But if somebody does need to find a place,
this is something I'm interested in.
Yes.
Too,
but as far as like if there's a family who actually needs a rental, Windermere,
you can just go to
the Manitou Property Management, you can always call them and see what they have available.
Right,
and they're readily available online. I'm also readily available anywhere online. If you just search Brian Zapotocky, that's probably a hard one to spell, but Brian Z, Windermere, you're probably going to find me. My phone number is out there for everyone to see, my email, all that sort of stuff. I have a really amazing real estate assistant that I hired as well. So even if I'm not available, she can be available and that sort of thing. So life's good, man.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So with the rental thing, I just want, because I'm interested, this is something I wanted to talk to you more about.
Oh, absolutely,
just about the real estate business. So you're saying that you can help somebody find a real estate or a rental property, and then your other team will help get renters in it.
Yes.
So it's like a full encompassing
full service. Yeah, because they're both
business.
Because again, I used to do that. I didn't do it professionally. I pretty much did my own rentals for a long time, and like I managed those by myself. But then I got so busy on my brokerage side that it's like, I'm like, well, I don't have time to do that and this. So I handed that off to our property managers, but they really are two separate specialties to really do it well. And so I do the brokerage and then they do the,
But you guys do like full service. So that's
100%.
Cool. Cause like I don't want to be a landlord. Like,
yeah,
I don't want to be I'd rather pay whatever that percentage is to have somebody manage it for me.
Yeah, it's a negotiated percentage and it varies, but no, you're exactly right. And there were aspects of landlording that I really liked, but I tell people all the time, you have to be really good at saying no. Really good at saying no, because there's a lot of people that they're great people, they're amazing people, they have needs, but they do not have the ability to sustain themselves in your rental.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able to say no to them and say, look, you don't qualify based on our criteria. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Or even really good renters. I mean, I've had renters over the years that ask me for all sorts of things, as you can imagine. And you have to be really good, not just saying no, like like a jerk, but
No,
just
yeah.
like explaining like, look, here are the reasons I'm not going to allow that because of this, this, and this. And most of the time people are very reasonable and they go, okay.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who have a hard time saying no. And I always tell people, if you have a hard time saying no, or you don't like to deal with problem solving, like that's probably 99% of landlording is problem solving and saying no to people.
So get a management company.
Yeah, that's what I did, and it's been very rewarding. So I'd highly recommend them to anybody.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, that's Brian Zapotocky.
Yeah.
City Chapters Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby J. Thank you, man. Thank you for coming on today.
And thanks for having me. This has been fun.
It was awesome. Sweet.